What is up, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. October is finally here. That, of course, means Halloween, maybe a little topwater bass fishing, and some cooler months, some cooler days are ahead of us. If you're up there in the northern country, my friends from the Midwest, and the full fall feed is upon us in a lot of ways. And I feel like this is the thing. I'm going to talk about a lot of different regions because there's a lot of people on this that watch this video or just two major regions. I break it down. I break it down from like Kentucky, if you draw a line, Kentucky to like a Virginia, Kentucky line, to from there like north, it's like sort of the northern country, like near Indiana, further up probably like Michigan, Minnesota, New York. Obviously the climate changes a little bit different as you go further north, and then of course down below being the southern states. And so I feel like that's typically when I talk about south or north, that's sort of what's going on. But we're going to talk about my top baits for this month, and fishing can be tough, but it's actually some of the best bass fishing. Also, you can find some of the biggest fish for the month of October. So let's dive into it right now. First off, I'm going to have to decide what I didn't pick 5 baits. I picked 6 for you guys. I picked a bonus one for you all because I can't. It's tough. I think when I think of October, I think of a hodgepodging kind of month. You're going to have to sort of do several different things to generate bites, especially down south. Up north, the fish are grouping up, and so it's a little bit different in that scenario because they're feeding up and they're going to move to their like more of their wintering spots, if you will. So you're basically a month or 2 months ahead of a lot of our fish that are further down south. First bait I'm going to talk about right now is a frog. Okay, here we go. Got the frog right here, and everybody loves topwater bass fishing. This is the month to make it happen down south in a lot of ways. No matter if you're in Sam Rayburn, Toledo Bend, Chickamauga, Gunnersville, October to me is the frogging month just because what happens is the water starts to drop in a lot of these lakes. The grass, or maybe it doesn't drop, but the grass is really at full health, if you will. It's sort of at its full health, and it's really like maximum potential of that year. So it's matted out, and a lot of times that grass starts to top out and canopy out and then thin out. So what happens is first grass comes up, hydrilla, milfoil, a lot of those, then it canopies out, then it makes a nice scum mat, and you hear that cheese mat. You know what I'm talking about? The cheese, you see that? That is what I'm talking about when I'm throwing a frog, and that's why October is my favorite month for throwing a frog, because you have a lot of those cheesy mats, and typically below cheesy mats, it's hollowed out. So if you see the grass that's a little bit more brown, or you're gonna notice that's the grass that hasn't quite cheesed up, and that canopy's not quite there yet. It's a little bit too thick maybe for frogging. You might have to use a punch rod to catch those fish, but that's what I'm looking for, those cheesy mats, because guess what? Those fish can group up underneath there, and underneath that mat, it's hollowed out, and there's an area, it's a whole ecosystem below that mat, and those fish are feeding on bluegill and shad and crawfish and everything else. So that is what I'm looking for when I'm throwing the frog, and that's like one of my favorite things to do. Now, as far as what frog to throw, right now I'm actually throwing a different one. This is a Booyah Pad Crasher. Pretty solid frog, no problems with that. I actually caught a few on it in the team series, the rod that I had rigged up with the team series with DC. And I would say probably swap that hook out though. I didn't lose any, but it just doesn't seem like it's the best hook. It's okay. But shad profile, keep it simple. Natural, right? So you got like a more natural color. So I'd say this is more natural. It's sort of shaddy, you know, maybe translucent colors. Then I would say like a black, and then I would say a white. So keep it simple, translucent color, shad, you know, something like that. Black, white, keep your frog color simple. I do like throwing 50-pound Suffix 832 braid. To me, I get further casting distance with 50. The one thing you're gonna have to deal with though, if you're throwing 50-pound braid on a casting rod for bass out there on a frog, you don't have as much, you know, obviously as you would if the higher pound test 65 and stuff like that. So your abrasion resistance is a little bit less. So you could, like, you have to be a little bit smarter and pay attention. You're not, pay attention if you didn't snag on top of something like a rock, nicked your line. It's a little bit more prone to possibly breaking off. Now, that being said, I never break it off. I've never have on a fish. But the times that I have like broken it off on a rock or something like that, there's been like a little fray in my line, and you have to pay attention to that. I've learned my lessons. Just seeing that, and it hasn't cost me in a tournament yet, but that is something that, to me, I like the 50-pound test, get a little bit further casting ability, and you still have enough to pull them out of the thickest cover you can find in your lake. So that being said, if I'm frogging matted vegetation, I'd select a 7/6 heavy rod, okay, because I want a longer rod. I'm not skipping this rod. I'm not making those roll casts. So 7/6 heavy, Signature Series, Jacob Wheeler Signature Series, these just went on sale, 20% off on Academy's website. So I'll try to drop a link below for you all. 20% off right now is a great time to pick them up. This rod right here is a phenomenal punch rod and flipping rod. So literally, you could have this rod, put a frog on there, then you can pick up an ounce weight and punch that same mat. And it's a phenomenal rod for that, and flipping bushes. A really good all-around like grass rod. Heavy cover, just really has a lot of backbone and really pulls them out of the cover. So it truly is a great all-around punching, flipping, frogging rod. So that being said, this rod's ready to roll. Reel gear ratio, I keep it fairly simple. I like a faster gear ratio because when I set the hook, I'm trying to pull in those fish and lock up and try to keep tension on that line. The worst thing you can do is you let that line go slack. Those fish a lot of times from a further distance, getting some lily pads, something like that even, you're gonna have a hard time getting those fish out of there. Another thing that I will recommend, I just did it right there. I didn't do it really that bad. All right. How many people do you know that do this right here with a frog? Do not do that. And I'm going to tell you why. You're literally going to mess up your frog by doing that. Every person that does that to a frog of mine, I'm just going to like backhand them. And what I mean by that is, so what I do is I like to put it on, I do like to put it on my reel. I typically do. Now, your problem is if you do put it on your reel, sometimes you can actually catch the braid and hook your braid, which could ruin your spool of line, but I still do this because I feel like it's the best way to do it. So what I'll end up doing is I'll take the frog hook and rotate it around and then just put it right there. So that way I'm not pushing on this frog. A frog is soft plastic, right? So if you put a little bit too much pressure on that frog, a lot of times what it'll do is it'll make an indentation right there and you can't get that out, and then you ruin your frog and you're like, you make a cast and all you catch is grass. Don't do that. So that's number one. We're going to talk about where am I going to be throwing a frog. I'm not going to get too crazy with this. We are on Watts Bar Lake, which is just up from my home lake on Chickamauga. So let's just sort of talk about this. I like Watts Bar just because it's diverse. It's got a main river, of course, and then you have pockets and creeks and everything else. The sea maps is pretty good in that area as well. So we'll just slide back in some of these creeks. This is like a major creek right here, Town Creek. If there's grass in these flats right here, this is the kind of stuff that I'm going to be looking for. Grass flats, major backs of pockets, like places this red contour that's on like 4 and 5 feet and less is my red. So you're seeing like the backs of those pockets. These are the areas I'm really looking for the grass. And that's some of the stuff, the flatter the pockets, the more expansive a lot of times the grass is going to be. Not every pocket in the back of a creek has grass, but you have to run around, you have to find it. And that's the kind of stuff. Now, the one thing I will also say, you could have cheesy mats, but if you're not hearing movement and like action of like actually bait and bluegill, typically, that's what I'm looking for as well this time of year is an alive mat. When you hear like it's live, a lot of stuff going on, that is what I'm looking for. Those mats, I'm hearing a lot of bluegill popping. I'm seeing some fish boil. That's really the telltale sign. If you're not seeing that, keep moving because you're probably not around a ton of fish, and that's what's crazy. This is what's so cool about mat fishing this time of year is literally you could throw that frog. You could go to a mat this week and I could roll in the back of this pocket right here and not get a bite. In the next week, it thins out and the winning fish are underneath that mat. It happens in just a few days. And that's what's so cool about October is because we're getting those cool nights, everything's changing, and everything can change at just a blink of an eye. So don't necessarily write something off just because you saw, hey, they weren't there 10 days ago. Might be the best mat on the lake. So that being said, frog fishing is one of my favorite things. That is definitely number one for me because I just love throwing topwaters. I hope you do too. If you don't like throwing topwaters, I got some other ones down here for you all. Let's just sort of jump into ultimate hodgepodging rig, and that's a jig. Okay, a jig, you got to have something to pitch around no matter where you're at, whether you're flipping milfoil up north, whether you're fishing grass, wood, docks, rock. You need something to pitch around, whether you're fishing offshore, dragging around on rock. And, you know, a jig is, for me, this is the time of year I love throwing a jig. This is a little finesse jig. My buddy Whitney Stevens designed this one. It's a blue rock jig. It's good. It's a good little finesse jig. Now, as far as trailers go, you know, green pumpkins, I'm pretty simple on my jigs. Look, a lot of times what I do, this is a green pumpkin with a little purple in him. But what a lot of times I do, I like contrast to my trailers. And I have 3 different cleanup crawls right here. So I have 3 different cleanup crawls. I have a black and blue, black blue flake. I got green pumpkin blue, and then I got like a green pumpkin chartreuse. So I'll show you for example. I don't like necessarily like matching my jig to the exact, well, I thought I had one here. I don't like necessarily matching my jig to the exact color of my trailer. I like mix matching it a little bit, just a little contrast. So what I'll do with here, this is a cleanup crawl, like Crush City cleanup crawl. I'll come in here, I'll grab some scissors, and I'll make them a little smaller. I'll go about half the size because I'm still wanting them to be compact. This guy right here is ready to roll. And then the reason I made it so solid too in this bait is I wanted something that would hold up and I could do just that. So I can flip him, but I also can keep him a little finessey. And I might even, if I want a real compact jig, I just did that right there. Now you literally have this little kicking action. You have your hook right here. Boom, fish eats it, catch him. It's just, to me, that's what I like, that contrasting look overall of that jig. You can see sort of like, if you guys can see that, you can sort of see that jig is just nice. So dirtier water, I'm going to throw like a little stain, green pumpkin, which we had a lot of rain here in the southeast. Green pumpkin, black and blue, great combination for right now. Now, if you have some just straight mud, you might have to go some old Tommy Biffle black and chartreuse, black and yellow. You know what I'm saying? Like, I might go black and blue on black. That's the only time I will. Well, or like, so if I'm throwing like black and blue and the water's dirty, a lot of times I'll throw black and blue with a blue sapphire trailer. Again, contrasting again, right? Adding a little more contrast is what I try to do. So if I need more contrast, I'm going to do something like that. But one thing I also like to do as well, even in clear water, I'm going to show you guys real quick here. Grabbing this is the green pumpkin chartreuse pepper. So because it is still green pumpkin base color, but he's got a lot more chartreuse. I made this one a little bit more chartreusey. If you know, there's a lot more like a vibrant chartreuse. Again, sort of, I'm gonna cut him a little bit taller, a little bit more meat to him, and then I'm gonna add that right. It's starting to rain. There you go. So you have a little bit more chartreuse of a looking, like you want to have a little more pop. Sometimes I love to do this with spotted bass and stuff like that, like adding a little more pop. So both those are the cleanup craws, black, blue, green pumpkin, chartreuse. I love that color for a trailer, like I said, when I'm trying to add a little bit more to it. That's really the reason I designed that color, to add a really vibrant chartreuse to my jigs and my trailers. So that is right there. As far as rod goes, I suggest like a 7.3 heavy in this scenario, especially being a hodgepodging type of a month. I want something that I can literally pitch around and pitch, skip a dock, also fish offshore. That 7.3 heavy is about the perfect size. Again, this rod right here will be on sale at Academy, 20% off. From my understanding, I'll look and just double check with that, but I'm pretty sure it's supposed to be coming up here pretty soon. I'll have to double check for y'all, but it is popping up. 8:3 to 1 gear ratio is what I recommend. 17 to 20 pound test. I'm not big on the 15 pound line, but 17 is probably my favorite on the Suffix fluorocarbon line. But if you're in some thicker cover, 20 would be fine as well. I know people who love throwing 20. You slack on them, you don't break them off as easy. If you're really like brave and you're like OCD and you pay attention to every little thing of like, hey, there's any nick in your line, you might want to throw 15. If that's what you prefer, it's completely understandable. But pay attention to your line, because that is one thing that a lot of times what we'll end up doing is we set the hook a lot, start catching a few fish, and when that big one bites, we got too excited that we were caught catching all those fish and we didn't check our line, and pop. I've done it plenty of times. So that's what I recommend. This guy's a good little jig. That is number 2 for the month of October. Hold. Let me really quick here. I forgot. What am I going to be fishing? I can't get too specific in this scenario, sort of like the frog where I sort of, but docks, wood, rocks. I mean, basically anything. I might fish steeper banks with rock because of all this current right now. I might be fishing steep, bluffy banks because there's current running through a lot of the system in the Tennessee River. I might be fishing the boat docks, any little current break. Fishing offshore on little rocky points. That's still something. Higher spots. Like, I'm typically in the south this time of year, I fish generally a little bit shallower. Adjacent to flats, points, 6 to 10 feet of water if I'm fishing offshore, and then I fish shallower than that if I'm not, like, up there around the docks, and 5 foot and less is typically what I'm focusing on. But that jig's great for doing that. So nothing too crazy I'm going to show you on here, but basically, if that's a bait, if you want to lock it in your hand, you can do a lot of different things with it and cast to what's in front of you, and you're going to get some bites. Next up on the list would be a chatterbait. You guys know, I did a spinnerbait last month, and a chatterbait to me is just one you have to have. Like, it just cover water. This is a jackhammer. You can buy there's a lot of different other chatterbaits out there as far as price points. I like it a lot. It has a good hook, and I throw a freeloader on the back of them. Same thing I like to do with my chatterbaits is sort of like what I do with my jigs. I like to contrast the trailer. So if I want to tone this chatterbait down and make him more like a little bit more low key and the water's real clean, I'll throw a green pumpkin. If I want him to be more shaddy and be like a little bit, because it is green pumpkin up top and shad, and more of like a shad pattern below and white, I'll throw more white on him. So that's what I sort of like about it. As I only have a handful of chatterbait colors, but I do have a lot of, freeloaders, because at the end of the day, to me, it's a lot cheaper to buy 5 packs of freeloaders than buying 10 different colors of jackhammers. It just is. It's just more efficient. You're able to sort of dress him up and dress him down depending on how you need to do it. And then this allows for you to do that with only a few different colors. So that's sort of like the mindset. Like, so in the springtime, a lot of times I'll throw a fire crawl chatterbait or a fire crawl colored like freeloader on the back of a green pumpkin. But then I'll throw, if I want him natural, I might throw black and blue on green pumpkin. So it just sort of depends, or if it's really water's clean, again, green pumpkin-y or sungill or something like that. So it just gives you options, and you can sort of make your bait look the right thing, right what you really want it to, what you really want to imitate, if you will. As far as gear ratio and rod reel line, I love this rod right here. This is, if there's one rod that I am like, this thing absolutely crushes them for a chatterbait. I designed this rod. This is a part of my Duck It Select rod series. I just came out this season. This rod is insane on a chatterbait. 7.4, medium heavy. It has enough backbone. It's more of a parabolic bend. It feels like glass or a graphite composite, but it does not have the weight of that, which is awesome to me. And it's just like great for casting on grass flats and fishing around stuff. You can make long casts, and you just wind into them and you pull them. I mean, it just, rod setup is everything with a chatterbait, because a lot of times you'll lose a lot of fish because you snap set. If you snap set, you're going to lose a lot of fish regardless. But you need to be reel setting on a chatterbait. You reel down, sucker bites it, pull, follow through, and that rod loads up, and you got the fish. Top, dead center. Actually, a lot of times the best fish that I've had hooked on chatterbait over the years has always been the ones where I'm like, I reel, and I sort of get like a sort of halfway hook set, and it's always like through the skull, and I'm like you don't realize you don't need that much. You don't really have to snap set it or anything like that. You just sort of pull a little pressure, you keep reeling, and watching Brett Hite do that for years, and he's a master at it, obviously, but that's something that I have learned, don't do snap setting. As far as gear ratio on this, I'm a little bit different. 6:8 to 1 gear ratio, 7:1. Slower gear ratio for me because I want to keep that bait down a lot of times, and I have a tendency to keep it up. So especially when you're fishing grass, I want a slower gear ratio to keep ticking the tops of the grass. And then if I'm fishing like super shallow, I might go to 7:1 because those fish grab it and they want to come to you, and you have to reel a little bit faster to catch up to them. So it's a little bit different. So 6:1 gear ratios for like deeper grass, up shallower. 7:1 is what I recommend. 17-pound Suffix Advanced Fluorocarbon is my recommendation as far as line size. And just go out there, cast and wind. As far as where am I going to be fishing this guy, pretty simple. overall, same sort of stuff sort of in the backs of these creeks where these frog fish are at. Out from there, there's grass that's not quite matted out yet a lot of times. So I might go out here in front of there, in a lot of these places, these little points and these little nooks out here and these turns on these major flats, the fish that are actually inside the mat or maybe haven't showed up yet to go inside that mat because the bait's not there, a lot of times they'll be on the outside edge of that grass, further out. So utilizing maybe side imaging some of that grass, or just maybe even 2D. You get out there on that grass flat and you can see your contours and you start feeling around. Oh, there's that grass. You want to get out a little bit further from that because those fish probably haven't made it there, but they're on some of that submerged grass that's out in front of there. That's what I would recommend, of course. And just fishing it like just on gravel areas and fishing down the banks. And even if you don't have grass in your lake, that's fine. Just fishing it down in 2 to 4 foot of water. It's a great bait to cover water with the water stained. Phenomenal bait to do that, and it gets bites. Just whining, cast, whine, get bites. I mean, ChatterBait's it's one of the best baits ever created, and there's a reason for that. So it's definitely one I always have in my arsenal. Next on my list is going to be none other than a jerkbait. A little bit early, a lot of people are like, man, wintertime bait. A jerkbait is probably the most underrated September, October bait in the South. And I mean, of course, you hear it up north, but in the South, it is a Maverick. This is a bait that I've thrown a lot this season and caught a lot of bass on it. He played pretty big at the Chowan River, caught some of my biggest bass there that week on the Chowan. And when those fish are just really fickle, you gotta really snap a jerkbait pretty hard and fast this time of year because the water temperature is a little bit warmer, and those fish you just got to make them react. So you're pop, 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 and they just lock up, and all of a sudden you got one. So rather than like the pre-spawn or the wintertime where you're pop, 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 stop, pop, pop, stop, like you're giving them time to sort of come up and get it. This is the time of year you either get it or I'm out of here scenario. That's the best way I like to put that. You either come and get it or I'm gone. So you make them make a decision because they have. I've always said this, and I truly believe this. I feel like bass right now, especially there's more pressure, no doubt. There's definitely more pressure on our bodies of water than ever before. But I also want to say this: I think bass process information at a faster rate. Let me say that again. Bass process information at a faster rate during the water temperature when they're warmer than when it's colder. They don't recognize, hey, that's not food, or hey, that's like, if they don't like something about your bait in warmer water, they're out. Like instantly, they make that split-second decision. Where in the pre-spawn, they'll sit there and they'll analyze it, and they might be interested, and they'll swim up a little bit more and follow it. That's not the case. And of course, I've learned a lot of that from using Active Target, but that's something that it's easy to see that these fish literally, they can process the information of whether they're going to eat that bait right now or not faster than they can in the wintertime. So during these months when the water's warm, you better be moving your baits a little bit faster. Speed is definitely your friend. As far as rod setup, 610 medium action right here. I have a 6.8. Medium action jerkbait rod in the Select series. It's a phenomenal rod as well. This is one of my favorite reels. I'm not going to lie. The Curado, that's at 150. Curado 7:4 to 1 gear ratio. Money. I mean, I feel like it's one of the best reels made. It's the 150 HG. So they're sort of in between size with the 7:4 to 1 gear ratio. Great reel. Probably like I showed MDJ this, Flip. It's a phenomenal pitching reel. It's super free. It casts extremely well. And I probably have 15 or 20 of them. I still have a few of the Ducket reels from back in the day. They're discontinued, but these are the reels I'm sort of rotating some of those out and just playing around with it. Really good reel if you're looking for a new bait caster. I've not tried the SLXs. I know they're maybe a little bit less expensive. I got to check those out as well. As far as line size, believe it or not, 12 to 14. If I'm fishing shallower, even up to 17. Don't get too caught up with like line size being, hey, 17. You can't throw 17 on a jerkbait. No, you can. You can throw 20 on a jerkbait if you want that bait to not dive as deep. I'll throw 20. So this guy right here is phenomenal. Love that Maverick. A lot of different colors. Matte Shad's, of course, one of my favorites. This guy's ready to roll, and it's one you want to add into your arsenal. I'm going to show you real quick some of the stuff that I'm going to be fishing. Definitely some of these points. Any little sway like this right here, you see how the You see how these contours bunch up right there and this little secondary point right there? It's a great little place for like a flat. Might have a little grass on the edge. That little place right there might be a perfect place to throw a jerkbait or a topwater. You know what I'm saying? Like something like that. Same thing up here. It's probably like 6 or 8 feet deep on top of that hump. Down the back sides of some of these flats. Edges of grass, same scenario as maybe throwing the chatterbait, and if they get irritated that they don't really want to bite a chatterbait, switching it up with a jerkbait could be the way of generating some more bites. And then of course, just just going down the bank, fishing around docks, fishing around wood, fishing down the bank, you can just get bites with the jerkbait, especially if they're not wanting to come up and eat topwater that day. A jerkbait could be your best bet in generating bites. So always remember that. Next on the list is my friend, the skitter pop. Topwater action is one of my favorites. Right here, the skitter pop is just like the bait size this time of year, smaller. A lot of times the fish are coming up and blowing up on a little bit smaller bait. The skitter pop is underrated. Pop R's and overall amongst if you guys haven't watched the video, I did a full masterclass, or not masterclass, it's more of like a beginner class, but it was sort of like a setup of like beyond like the basics of bass fishing. If I'm actually starting to do those right now. So if you guys have anything like tip wise you want me to talk about, really giving you a full breakdown of from cadence to everything that I'm really thinking about. And a lot of it's like, I say it's a beginner class, but it's really not. I mean, it goes pretty deep into stuff that like even probably 5 years ago that I didn't even know. You know what I'm saying? Like stuff that I've learned over the years. But there is a lot of stuff of like just picking the right line size and picking the stuff that you might need to know. So let me know if you do have anything that you guys are looking for. You want to know a little bit more about it. Those are something that I will probably be filming a lot more in December. So I'll be dropping a lot more of those. We have some really cool tournament content that's going to be coming up here really soon. But back to sort of the topwater action of this X-Pop. X-Pop's the opposite one of this guy's is the skitter pop. This one has a little bit more spitting action. I can still walk him in place. I throw that 30-pound braid. I do put a loop knot on him. That's what I recommend. Just pop, 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 pop. If you want to know more about how I work this bait, that video I just dropped on the channel probably about a month ago is up there, so check that out. It talks a little bit of difference about chugging topwater and a spitting topwater, and I have that right there, but definitely recommend that. 30-pound braid is probably my favorite. 30-pound 832 braid is probably my favorite, and I will put a fluorocarbon leader, 20, 30-pound monoliter, fluorocarbon leader. I'm just only using about 6 or 8 inches, so even though fluorocarbon does sink, I'm not as worried about that because it's only 6 or 8 inches of a leader. I don't want to reel that up into my guides necessarily, so that's sort of what I would recommend on that. And 6-8, same rod you throw a jerkbait on, this is what I'm throwing this topwater on. 6-10 right here, medium, pretty light action. 7 gear ratio. You can do a 6 to 1 to 8-3 to 1 gear ratio. Really does not matter a ton. I prefer higher gear ratios, but you can get away with a 6 to 1 gear ratio because typically you're not working that bait super fast. Just pop, 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 goosh. You have time to sort of pull into those fish and get them in. Sort of talking about where those fish would be set up. Same sort of deal right here. Is I still feel like a lot of these fish are going to be more pocket related or flat point related. Flat point would be like this. We haven't really talked about that. That big flat point comes extends out right there. Same thing right here. Flat point, sort of like a neck down right here between the islands. Great flat point for that topwater. Might have some grass, might have some rock, but that's where they're going to set up on that guy right there. And then last but not least, is a crankbait. We haven't talked about a crankbait a ton, but the fall is probably one of my favorite times to do and throw a crankbait, to cast this guy around. This one right here is a BX Brat, and he's more of a finesse style square bill. He's more finessey, and he absolutely gets down and catches a ton of fish. A little bit smaller. If you have like that 1.5 style square bill, this is guys like more of like a 1.15, if you will. So not like that small, super small one that you couldn't throw on a bait caster, but definitely an in-between size to really imitate the shad that are a lot of the bait fish that we're fishing around this time of year, and a lot of times the bass are keying in on those bait fish. So that is the guy right there, and he does get down pretty deep. One of the better square bills for getting down in the 6-foot range. It gets down there deeper than most. One that I absolutely have crushed them on in the springtime, but also a sleeper in the fall. Do not forget about cranking. Like I said, talking about the jerkbait, you have to make a lot of these fish react this time of year. They've seen so many baits throughout the year. that you have to make them react to that bait, and there's none better. There's no other baits better designed or better made than a crankbait to making a fish react, because you have speed. A lot of times you're deflecting off of cover, whether it's rock or wood, and even potentially grass. You're making those fish react, and they got to figure out, am I going to bite that thing or not? And when you got some trebles like this guy right here, I would recommend swapping out the trebles on this guy. I have right here, these are 2 short shank number 5. These are the hybrid, VMC hybrid hooks is what I would recommend for this guy right here. Fits in perfectly. It's about as big as I can get on this bait. And you'll see that is like, it is, I mean, perfect. You couldn't get a bigger gauge and a bigger hook on that bait. So it fits it phenomenally. So that is, now this rod right here is more in the actual, it's the Micro Magic Pro. The 7.0 medium, it's medium cranking rod. This is sort of like my flat side, smaller square bow rod is what I would throw it for mostly, but it's a good cranking rod, and it's one that, I like to crank with like 6-to-1 gear ratio reels. 6-to-2, 6-to-8, this is 6-to-8. When the Shimano's, I crank a 6-2. So, super simple, but one that I definitely would recommend. That BX Brat is a bad little dude. The last part of this is showing you some of the stuff that I would recommend, especially for the anglers out there that are actually fishing and there's not a lot of grass in their lakes. Same sort of stuff that I'm fishing in some of the backs of these creek arms. Instead of fishing grass, I'm fishing a lot of wood if there is no grass in your bodies of water. A lot of laydowns, a lot of stumps. Wood is sort of like the perfect, it's like the perfect cover for the bass in the fall. Boat docks, of course, but for cranking, I'm thinking wood and rock. Those are the 2 things that I'm really focusing on. I'm focusing on a little bit more stained water, so if your lake is lacking the stained water, then I'm not going to probably be cranking on that body of water that much, but if there's a little stain in the backs of the creeks, which we have this little bit of rain, things are happening, things are coming in, I would recommend going in the backs of those creeks, the backs of the pockets. They typically have a lot of blown in wood, stuff like that. And the major creeks typically have a little bit more. Slide back in the back of like this big creek right here. Typically you have a lot, especially when you have like a place like this that has a lot of different ditches and in places like this, there's going to be on the sides of these flats, especially when you have no grass, and envisioning this place has no grass right here, there's going to be a lot of that from the spring rains. There's going to be a lot of wood that gets thrown down through here. And you can see even right here, it says stumps on my maps. It's stumps. All that says stumps. So I already know there's plenty of stumps back there. So there's stumps underneath the water, 1. And I'm looking for laydown, some like horizontal cover. That's what I'm going to be looking for, cranking that crankbait around. Now, if I'm not doing well in the backs of the creeks with that crankbait, another thing that I'm going to be looking for, slide out to the main river. That was secondary. Sliding back out to the main river is some rocky little banks like that. Especially if anything that has a little current flow. A lot of water is going through a lot of the systems right now. Current flow, if there is current moving, a lot of drawdown, a lot of these outside bends is a good way to go. So that is my recommendation as far as color goes. Shad patterns, crawdad patterns. If the fish are eating crawls on your lake, pay attention to that. If you put a fish in the live well, a fish in tournament, or you look in their throat, if they have times they'll have pinchers coming out, maybe it's time to switch it over and throw a brown crawl crankbait. I think it's underrated this time of year. Some people don't know that. Fish sometimes focus on crawdads and crawfish this time of year. It's another reason why I like to throw a jig this time of year as well. So same thing, typically shad patterns, but don't be afraid to throw more of that brown color, because a lot of times the fish are, or those shad aren't the main forage for some of these fish that are fishing focusing on shallow. Sometimes it is a crawfish, and those fish are typically keying in on those crawfish that are green, like a green pumpkin-y brown color. So that's what I would recommend. There's 6 rods right here. Dang, I didn't even put a spinning rod in here. Power fishing, running down the bank. No spinning rods for me this month. But hopefully you guys have a phenomenal month of bass fishing. I have plenty of trips planned. I got to go to Italy. I'm going to be fishing a team series event in Texas with DC. I'm looking forward to it. We'll have plenty of content on the channel. Hopefully you guys get out there and catch a bass for me. We will see you on the next one.